this is Georgia Raysman, and I'm here on the Monday Scoop with Pam Belluck, a science and health reporter and a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the New York Times. We're going to talk today about science and health information online. All of us know, or we should know, that just what's online, just because it's online, does not mean that it is true or accurate or informative. But it can look, all of those things, it can look very true, very real, very helpful. But so much stuff that's online is not believable, and yet it can impact our lives and our health in a very real way. So what I wanted to talk with Pam about is, if we're going to look at this stuff that's online, and if we ourselves or a friend or a loved one has a health situation that they need to deal with, how do we make sure that we're looking at authoritative information? So let's get to that right away, Pam. You do a lot of reporting on health and science and on serious illnesses of all sorts, maybe viruses. The Pulitzer Prize was given for your writing with others on the Ebola virus. And you deal with pregnancy, you deal with postpartum issues, you deal with all sorts of health issues. And you're looking for information online, I'm sure, in addition to other sources. So you come across a site that looks perfectly plausible and very realistic and gives you all sorts of information and promotes X. A miracle cure or a wonderful new find. How do you determine whether that's real or not?
Well, in journalism, kind of the basic, cub reporter instructions, right? You find out who, what, when, where, and why. And I sort of feel that anybody looking at a health or medical site should follow kind of a similar way of thinking of things. Look at the site, who runs it. It should be able to give you the answer to that information very easily. You shouldn't have to look. So if it's a government site, or if it is a university-run site or an academic site, it should have a Who We Are or About Us tab, and you should be able to look at that and see who runs it. Are there medically trained people or scientifically trained people involved in it? Do they have a scientific advisory board? That's sort of your first,
So science is an important part of it.
Science, what you want to see is some, preferably a lot, of indication that they are following scientific evidence, because so many things get tested or tried or promoted for health conditions, and a lot of times they just don't work. That's just the reality of science. So if something is being featured on, say, a National Institutes of Health website, Medline is the National Institutes of Health sort of public-facing medical site.
Or the Cleveland Clinic, I would take
or
it.
The Cleveland Clinic.
A university-based site.
Or Mayo, pretty much, any kind of government-run .gov site, the CDC, for example, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. If it's going to be highlighted there as a treatment or an approach, you know that it has been tested multiple times in many different labs under many different circumstances, and that they know it's safe, which is a very important thing, that the side effects are not dangerous, although they should also disclose what the side effects might be. And you know who it was tested on. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it doesn't fit your age or disease profile. So you need to sort of look at who is offering the information and what type of information they are offering and what the source of that is.
So many of the sites look plausible, though, and they have a piteous-looking patients and a lot of testimonials about how wonderful this acorn kernel has been for my heart disease. Nobody ever heard of an acorn kernel used for heart disease, but here are all these people who say that they were helped, and their advisory board consists of a lot of people who say they were helped by acorn kernels. And how do you not? You
got to watch out for those acorn people, especially if they're faces of squirrels on there. You want to stay away. But no, testimonials can be a red flag, or should certainly be. One should certainly be skeptical.
That's because it's anecdotal evidence, isn't that right?
Anecdotal evidence. It may be, they may be real people.
Yeah.
They may have actually been helped by acorns. But if you're only hearing, you know, it's sort of like a Yelp review where like only the 5-star, you know, this is the most wonderful lasagna I've ever tasted is on there. Well, you know, not everybody's going to like that. So with medicine, with health conditions, it's even more, it's much more important. Not that lasagna isn't important, but it's much more important. These are anecdotes are just what they are. They're one person's story.
I think they have a reality that people respond to. Exactly. I mean, when you talk about a scientific survey in which 6,000 people were tested and 43% of them responded this way and 37% responded that way, it's very abstract.
Yes.
I mean, that's what they say about statistics, right? That, you know, that 4 people having died is tragic, and 4,000 people in India is meaningless because it's 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. And when you have an anecdote, it has a tremendous power, even though it could be completely irrational. And if you list 8 people having this anecdote on the front page of this website, it seems like, oh my God, those acorn kernels must work.
Right.
Whereas a survey that says acorn kernels are meaningless, but you should use this multisyllabic medicine put out by, heaven forbid, big pharma, you know, like all big pharma's out there to kill us.
Right.
It's very hard. It's very hard to try to get around that.
You need to come to these sites, and it's hard because especially if you are somebody who is experiencing a medical issue yourself or somebody close to you is, you are more vulnerable, you're more desirous of really getting an answer.
Yeah, you want
to
believe.
But you need to come to these sites basically armed with skepticism, you know, kind of all the way through. So if you're seeing testimonials from people saying this is wonderful, you know, first of all, if there's no contradictory testimonial, and if there's no option for anybody just, you know, to post their own, then that tells you that somebody is controlling the information and directing it only in a very positive way.
That's a very good point.
Right?
That's a very good point. So you have to look for an ability to present both sides of the fact, not both sides of the issue, not just
exactly
the acorns are the only way to go.
Exactly. And you know, you don't know who these people are. They could be real, they couldn't. But even if even if they are real, maybe it could be a placebo effect. How do you know? You know, you're not able to talk to Mrs. Smith in the testimonial.
Or Patsy G from Alabama.
Right,
yeah.
or Patsy G, you know, and assuming Patsy is real, what were her other situations? Does she have the same profile as you or your mother?
Right.
You know, so basically I would say testimonials are generally pretty meaningless.
Right.
You know, I think the overarching theme, and it's not one that, you know, kind of, you can see why it's easy for people to go toward the simple. But the truth is that the reason why we don't have treatments for a lot of medical conditions is that the ones we don't have treatments for are generally very complex and they have a lot of variability. You know, cancer is a 6-letter word, but how many different types of cancers are there? And within each type of cancer, they affect so many different people differently and at different stages, and they can have multiple causes.
And people don't like complexity, and I understand that. And when you're sick and when you're grievously sick, complexity is the last thing you really want. And what you, I'm sure, grab for is some hope that is simple.
Right.
And I think what's so dangerous, though, is when you see somebody who has that cancer problem, and what they're doing is they're looking at the acorn instead of at Sloan Kettering.
Right.
It's so scary because you know that Sloan Kettering could have a solution for them, and the acorn is not going to be the solution. And then getting them to give up that potential hope for something that is a real hope.
Right.
And of course, then you run into the issue of what if even Sloan Kettering is not going to be able to cure them, and then maybe the acorn it's a hope, and then.
Well, so that's the thing. Sloan Kettering or Mayo Clinic or
the Dana-Farber
or the NIH, they will be, one way that you know that they're credible is that they will be giving you the risks and benefits. Because there is really nothing that you can take as a treatment for really anything that couldn't potentially have a side effect for
right.
you. And the way that we evaluate medical treatments and cures is the risk of the side effects strongly outweighed by the efficacy, by the effectiveness of the treatment, of how much it's going to help you. Right. But, you know, for example, when we write medical stories for the New York Times, first of all, we're very careful about what types of things we write about. We do all of this type of due diligence that I'm describing before we even decide to write about it. But if we do, it's because we've decided, okay, you know, this is a well-done study. It's very large. They've tested lots of different people. They've had a control group that didn't have the disease. They tested it against other types of treatments that people already use. All of that stuff. It's randomized. It's double-blinded. All of these things which are really important. But the other thing that we'll do is we always mention the caveats or what is not known. And I'm a big advocate for saying what we don't know yet. You know, maybe this hasn't been tested in children, or, which is very common because you don't do a lot of clinical trials in children because they're vulnerable. Don't do a lot of clinical trials in pregnant women.
Well, and then too, especially in your articles, your articles are very clear about what the statistical significance is and what that means, but there's so much, people don't have a general sense of statistical significance. Right. So if you say the incidence went from 5 to 10%, it doubled, but you know, doubling is from 5 to 10% might not be significant if your other problem is going to go, you know, is at a level of 70% probability you're going to die. Right. You know, the side effect going from 5 to 7 and doubling doesn't matter if the 70% dying is the other side effect, is the other consequence. So I think a lack of statistical understanding hampers people, and reporting is part of that, because a lot of reporters don't even get that. I mean, the headline will be, your side effect risk is going to double, and people say, oh my God, I'm not going to do it. Right. But without saying, yeah, doubling, but it's doubling from 1 to 2%, you know, big deal.
Well, good health journalism and good health information will put these things in context. Yeah. And that's why, you know, the NIH or the CDC, they have public-facing information. In other words, for the general public, doesn't have a whole lot of the statistical stuff. But what it does say is, what does this mean? What does this
mean for you? Yeah. So if you were going to Google, you know, the acorn cure for heart disease, and came up with, because that's the way it's going to come. Some friend is going to say to you, you've got this heart problem. You know, my friend was cured by acorns. So you're going to look up the acorn cure for heart disease on Google, and you're going to get to this disreputable site that says acorn cures, you know, are really great. Right. What would you suggest that a person's next step be? I mean, now I'm at this site that says, here's my, you know, go take my acorn supplement. Right. First off, you get into the whole supplements issue, right? Well, how many acorns are there in that supplement? How likely is that, you know, even if you assume that supplements are going to work, which is a big assumption, how many acorns are in that supplement, and how good are those supplements after sitting on the shelf for 3.5 months or 6 months or a year and a half, and who knows if they're really supplements because they're not even regulated. Right. I mean, well,
before we even get to all of those really good questions, one thing you need to know is who's making money off, who are the acorn people? Right. Who is selling these acorns? Right. You know?
And there's so many celebrities dealing with that. Yes. I mean, that's where we're going to get into that issue. There's so many ostensibly well-credentialed people selling acorns, or the equivalent of acorns, right? There's Dr. Oz, there's Joseph Mercola, there's Gwyneth Paltrow, for heaven's sake. I mean, we are used to seeing so many celebrities. Yes. And because they are celebrities, and in some cases medical credentialed people like Dr. Oz, we think, well, they must know. If they say acorns are great, acorns must be it for heart disease, right? And they've got followings.
They have huge followings.
Huge followings.
So, skepticism is your best tool. If somebody is making money
from those acorns
of something that they are promoting, even if it seems like it's a legitimate supplement or you know, a legitimate medicine, if somebody is making money from that on their website, then at a minimum, you need to check it out
Up, down, and sideways.
Yeah, 6 ways to Sunday. I mean, you need to be very skeptical. Maybe it's right, but you certainly cannot take that site's word for it.
Yeah, I mean, after all, if somebody was up there saying, I think Buicks are wonderful cars, and by the way, they're sponsoring my show, you would take that with a grain of salt, right? And that there's Dr. Mercola saying, I think supplements are fabulous for your health, and by the way, I'm selling supplements, but we're supposed to believe that supplements are really fabulous for your health because he says so, because he's so honest.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why people don't have more skepticism about this stuff.
I don't always understand why they don't either. I mean, I think it's because these sites make it easy. You could just click right here and get them.
Right.
And it's very comforting.
Yeah.
And they're persuasive and they're charismatic.
And you want to believe because you don't feel well.
Yeah, you may be very desperate. And there's also kind of the sort of subtext with supplements in particular that, well, it doesn't hurt to try it. It's not going to do anything wrong.
Right.
And, that could be true depending, but something that is, natural may still have some negative interaction with some other medication you take.
Right.
And at the very least, it's going to, cost you a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, things that have been actually rigorously tested, like fish oil, which has been proposed and tested for everything from cardiovascular health to brain health, Alzheimer's. It's not necessarily dangerous, but there's very little slam dunk information that shows that it can help those conditions. And so what you're talking about there is paying a lot for fish oil, and not everybody has the wherewithal to do that. And if you're putting all your eggs in that basket, you may be missing something that's you're not spending your time doing what you should be doing, which is consulting your doctor and getting a second opinion, and finding people who can interpret the scientific research for you, who are credible. And having a sit down and saying, here's the pluses and minuses. So
your takeaway on all this, your scoop on all this, would be if you're looking for information and you're looking at stuff that looks credible online.
Yeah.
What would you suggest people remember as what they learned from all of this?
So another journalistic cliche is if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
I heard that one. That's a good one. Oh my!
One. So basically,
skepticism.
Yeah. So be skeptical. Look for reputable scientific sources. Look for that recommendation in many different reputable places.
Repetition is your friend.
Yeah, repetition is your friend. Repetition in credible places
sources
is your friend. If the sites for the Mayo Clinic and the NIH and the CDC and the Cleveland Clinic, their entries on this particular condition should be fairly consistent with each other. They should generally have similar indications of what we know.
Similar advice.
Yeah. Look at what they say about the risks. Look at what they say about what we don't know yet.
And if none of them are advocating acorns, forget acorns.
The other here's another cliche, but it really, I think, is operable in this topic, which is if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Pam. It was really great, and I appreciate your coming by and talking about this with me. It's so much fun. To you. And pretty soon, next time, we're going to be talking with Tom DeVincentis, who is a New York City veterinarian, author of Tales of the City, and about the importance of pets and our health. Thank you. Bye.